Hi again, everyone. My name is Larry Lemke, and I served as one of the technical consultants to the interveners during their consent judgment negotiations with Gelman and Eagle. In this final screencast, I'll wrap up with a short recap of the remedial activities included in the proposed CJ revisions and discuss several remaining issues and technical concerns.
In one of the earlier videos, I pointed out that the overarching goals of the consent judgment are to delineate the extent of 1,4-dioxane contamination, remove 1,4-dioxane mass from areas of high concentration, remediate 1,4-dioxane at the source area, and protect public health and the environment. Major features of the revised CJ intended to achieve those goals include 6 new delineation or compliance wells in the western area, 3 new sentinel wells along the northern prohibition zone boundary, 2 new boundary wells along the southern PZ boundary, eastern area mass removal via 2 purge wells located in suspected hotspots, 3 or more down gradient delineation wells and a GSI investigation in the West Park area, source area dioxane mass removal using phytoremediation, HSVE, and purge wells, and expansion of the groundwater use prohibition zone. That's a long list of detailed response actions, but it still leaves us with the central question of whether the proposed CJ revision should be approved. If you're looking for an ideal outcome, where all of the dioxane is identified and removed from the aquifer with complete certainty, you won't find it here. The reality of the situation, in my professional opinion, is that the geology of this area is too complex and the extent of the contaminant spread is too large for the site ever to be completely cleaned up, or even to reduce concentrations below 7.2 parts per billion everywhere. The cost would be prohibitive and the potential disruptions to streets and neighborhoods would be enormous. As a result, you can expect institutional controls like the groundwater use prohibition zone to remain and pump and treat remedial actions to continue for the foreseeable future. Nevertheless, the proposed CJ has several elements that I really like because they have the potential to limit the future spread of dioxane. At the same time, several issues remain that I wish were more clearly resolved. I'd like to end by sharing some thoughts on the strengths and weaknesses of the proposed CJ to help you come to your own conclusions. First, I'm very enthusiastic about the proposed actions in the source area. Removal of residual dioxane from soils and shallow groundwater there has the potential to mitigate future migration away from the former Gelman property and to reduce future concentrations in the eastern and western areas. Arguably, these response activities are long overdue. Second, mass removal by the 2 new purge wells in the eastern area should reduce the probability of non-compliance with respect to GSI criteria in down-gradient locations such as Allen Creek, and reduce the possibility of concentrations exceeding 7.2 parts per billion along the northern or southern prohibition zone boundaries. The simple fact of the matter is that mass removal from the current pump and treat system has reached a point of diminishing returns. Targeting eastern area hotspots therefore has the potential to significantly boost dioxane removal rates. The future benefits of hotspot mass reduction will be felt down gradient, even if the proposed wells are only pumped for the required minimum 2-year period. Third, additional delineation along with hydrogeologic assessment of the groundwater surface water dynamics in the West Park area is needed to evaluate and facilitate GSI compliance in that area. Finally, more wells are needed in the western area to delineate the extent of dioxane contamination along the edges of the plume and in the Honey Creek corridor, and to support enforcement of the western area non-expansion objective. The western area GSI objective also includes an evaluation to identify areas where groundwater could vent to surface waters in concentrations greater than 280 parts per billion. That study will include an evaluation of the Honey Creek tributary along the northern edge of the marshy area, where dioxane concentrations remain high and GSI exceedances are possible. I've pointed out several times that this site is complex. There are many things we don't know and will probably never know about it. Nevertheless, I'm confident when I say that all of these actions are sensible and beneficial over the short and long terms. On the other hand, the consent judgment leaves open some concerns that may need to be resolved in the future. I've already mentioned that some degree of expansion of the groundwater use prohibition zone is necessary, but I question the need to expand it to the extent that has been proposed. Fortunately, the revised CJ includes procedures that can be used to seek a contraction of the PZ boundaries as new data are generated, and the interveners have reserved a continuing right to participate in this matter. I also believe it would be better if the CJ included performance criteria for the proposed phytoremediation and heated soil vapor extraction projects. Because these are not specified, it isn't clear how EGLE will know how well they work or when to approve their termination. On the other hand, these are emerging remedial technologies, and it is difficult to know exactly what to expect or how fast results can be achieved until the systems are implemented and field data are collected. If and when Gelman seeks to end either of these efforts, a review process is specified and the interveners have a right to oppose termination and fully participate before the court if they disagree. Similarly, the revised CJ requires 3 new wells in the downgradient West Park investigation, but leaves open the question of whether additional wells would be drilled and where they would go. The CJ language is open-ended, stating that data from the initial 3 wells will be used to guide additional downgradient investigations as necessary to ensure compliance with the eastern area objectives. An example of where additional downgradient investigation may be needed lies east of Monitoring Well 107, which sits near the intersection of Dexter and Maple Roads. Beginning in 2013, concentrations in this well rose sharply and have hovered around 700 parts per billion since then. The water flowing past Monitoring Well 107 is going somewhere. When it comes to groundwater flow, what goes down must eventually come back up, and I worry that the screens used to collect groundwater from the monitoring wells on the opposite side of Maple Road are too deep to detect shallower contaminated groundwater downgradient of MW 107. If the downgradient migration is intercepted by the proposed wells in the West Park investigation, this concern could be put to rest. If not, additional shallower monitoring wells in the vicinity of MW 101, 81, or 91 would, in my opinion, be warranted. It would be nice to spell all of this out in the revised CJ, but groundwater investigations are iterative, and as a fallback, the interveners have continuing rights to review and provide input on proposed response activities and evaluations. Finally, the revised CJ includes groundwater surface water interface objectives in both the eastern and western areas. On its surface, that's a good thing. However, Michigan's Part 201 statute offers multiple alternatives for responsible parties to demonstrate GSI compliance, including dilution through mixing in the receiving water body. Therefore, if dioxane concentrations well above the 280 part per billion GSI criterion are present, the most reliable means of protecting surface waters is to reduce upgradient concentrations below the GSI criterion. In this respect, the revised CJ's emphasis on additional mass removal and source zone treatment may be more beneficial in the long run than the stated GSI interface objectives.
Well, that pretty much wraps up this last video and its summary of major revised consent judgment elements and several remaining technical concerns. When considering the merits of the revised CJ, it's important to keep in mind that it represents a negotiated proposal that contains elements of importance to all of the parties involved. I don't think anyone would argue that it is a perfect solution. It certainly has things that I like and dislike. The question is whether, on balance, the revised CJ moves remedial actions benefiting the affected communities forward enough to warrant its approval. Hopefully, these videos were somewhat more enjoyable than an hour-long lecture, although I'm saddened that current conditions prevent me from traveling back to Ann Arbor to deliver a public presentation in person. I'll end by saying that I consider it a privilege to have served as a technical consultant on this important project, and I hope that these videos have been informative and helpful to everyone who takes the time to watch them.